What you're looking at is a clip of me destroying elite pack after elite pack after elite pack. This is what happens when the build becomes fully online. You destroy everything. You can see that these elites stand absolutely no chance as they're constantly being gripped into a pile and stunned as they're bursted down by my minions. If that doesn't convince you this build is insane, check out this next clip where I do the world tier 4 dungeon at only level 52. I had 2 other people in my party and I completely, don't tell them I told you this, completely boosted them through it. And then after that, some of my friends saw I was in World Tier 4 and they DM'd me, and I carried 3 people who AFK'd during the boss and soloed the boss. You can see I am completely unkillable. But how is this build able to be so damn tanky while dealing so much damage? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to break down this build and show you exactly how to play it and how it works. Let's start by talking about the damage of this build. Most of the damage is coming from the Ring of Mendel, which has a lucky hit chance to cause all of your minions' attacks to do significant AoE damage. This core component of the build is why we're going to be running a wand in our main hand, because a wand has inherent lucky hit. Because of this reliance on lucky hit, we're also going to want lucky hit on every piece of gear that can get it. Our offhand, our helmet, our amulet, etc. And with the new stat that you can get lucky hit while you have a barrier, we now have access to crazy amounts of lucky hit, and it's why this ring has been proccing so often. On top of this, we also have a new heart that is going to cause us to constantly cast Corpse Tendrils, and this Corpse Tendrils autocast is going to proc the Ring of Mendel. It's also important to know that the Ring of Mendel damage actually scales off of the damage of your minions. This means anything that says your minions do bonus damage causes their heart to do extra damage. And this is why for our skeletons, for our mages, we're going to be running Bone Mages for an extra 40%. And for our golem, we're going to be running the blood golem for an extra 50%. And then in our paragon board and on our aspects and everywhere else, we have all of these multipliers that are making our minions do insane damage. But wait, this build actually gets even better. Because of the hearts that we're playing this season, most of our build is actually completely automated. Our heart that's automatically casting Corpse Tendrils is also going to be resummoning our skeletons when they die. And even though it says that the skills it casts do less damage, it actually doesn't affect the skeletons at all. And then we have another heart that's going to automatically curse nearby enemies, applying our Decrepify, which is a crucial component of the build. This actually allows us to not only auto-cast Decrepify, but also allows us to completely remove it from our bar, instead being able to take Blood Mist for increased survivability. Finally, our biggest damage heart by far is the Barber. The damage from this is insane. Whenever you crit an enemy, it's going to cause all subsequent damage the enemy takes to stack on that enemy. So you're hitting one guy, right? And you crit him, and then you hit him again and again and again and again and again, and you stack like 1.5 million damage on him. Well, then when the timer expires, that damage erupts and deals damage to every other enemy around him. And when you're talking about an AoE situation with the Ring of Mendel, well, you're hitting 10 enemies with the Ring of Mendel, and then all 10 enemies are exploding to do that damage again. Okay, so this build does insane damage, is mostly auto-casted, and is very tanky. How tanky is it really? Well, let's get into the tankiness combination that allows you to become almost unkillable. As mentioned previously, this is so tanky I'm able to literally stand in all of the mechanics from the World Tier 4 Capstone Dungeon at only level 52. And I was able to do this because I assembled this Exodia defense combo. This combo is the aspect of Shielding Storm, Osseous Gale, and the aspect of Ultimate Shadow. All 3 of these aspects are empowering our Bone Storm, turning it into a defensive masterpiece. The cornerstone of what enables this is the aspect of Shielding Storm, which causes our Bone Storm to give us a shield every time it deals damage. And remember, our Bone Storm is also being copied onto the Golem, so we're actually getting 2 Bone Storms out. So if there's Bone Storm on me, a Bone Storm on my Golem, and we're fighting 10 enemies, well, I'm getting 5% per enemy, so 5% times 10 is 50% of my life as barrier each second, and the Golem is hitting all of those people for another 50%. So every single second I'm getting 100% of my life as a shield. Then we're turning it into a Darkness skill, our Bone Storm into a Darkness skill, and this Darkness skill actually has a dot, and that dot also procs the barrier, and me and the Golem are applying the dot. So everything is dotted up, everything is ticking, and we're hitting them every second, and the barrier generation is ludicrous. To increase the uptime, the Osseous Gale aspect will cause our Bone Storm to consume nearby corpses to increase its duration. This will add an additional 10 seconds to it, and then when you pair this with the Decrepify curse, where we get cooldown reduction every time we lucky hit, it's going to allow us to get virtually 100% uptime on Bone Storm. And our lucky hit, just like the Ring of Mindel, we have so much setup for it, right? Because we're trying to make the Ring of Mindel do as much damage as possible. So not only do we have lucky hit on all of our gear, but also our minion choices with the Reapers, those are designed to proc lucky hit as much as possible. And the Thorns on our minions will proc lucky hit, the Golem active is going to be proccing lucky hit, the Reaper active ability is going to be proccing lucky hit, and this is how we get insane uptime on all of our abilities. You can see how this build becomes completely unkillable with insane uptime on Bone Storm generating ridiculous amounts of shield every second. Literally our entire HP pool every second as a shield. Like, what more could you possibly want for tankiness? This build is genuinely so much fun to play. It is by far my favorite build I've ever played. I've played every Barbarian build, every Necro build, and this build by far I think is the most fun. It feels like you're a god running around the map, pulling enemies, auto-casting everything. You're constantly in Blood Mist. You got your Bone Storm out. Your minions are blowing up everything. Everything's always getting pulled into a pile and destroyed. It feels amazing to play. And next we're going to be going into the skill tree to break down exactly what the specifics are that allow you to play like this. For our basic skill, we're going to be taking Reap. Reap will allow us to summon a corpse every 4 seconds and is also going to give us quite a bit of damage reduction. The corpse is really nice because the automatic corpse tendrils cast will go on the corpse and will enable the combo to start. For our core skills, we're just going to be taking the passive Huge Flesh, which gives us a lucky hit to spawn a corpse. These corpses are really useful for the Osseous Gale to increase the duration of Bone Storm and also to resummon minions, all of that kind of stuff. In our Corpse and Macabre skills, we're going to be taking Blood Mist. And this Blood Mist we're mostly taking because it gives us Unstoppable and immunity. And because we're proccing so much cooldown reduction between all of our gear and between Decrepify, the uptime on Blood Mist is extremely high. On top of this, we also are taking Ghastly Blood Mist, which will cause us to leave a corpse. And that corpse will serve as fuel, as mentioned with Huge Flesh, for corpse tendrils, resummoning minions, etc. And what's cool is all of your autocast stuff still works when you're in Blood Mist. So even while you're sitting in Blood Mist completely immune, your build will automatically use the corpses you're making to resummon minions, to cast corpse tendrils, everything else. It's amazing. We're also going to be taking Skeletal Warrior Mastery here for just 45% damage and life on our Skeletal Warriors. Moving on to Curses. We're going to be putting points into Decrepify. Now, the Heart automatically casts Decrepify at level 1, even if you don't have any points into it. But we need to put points into it to get access to Abhorrent Decrepify, which is going to cause our Decrepify to reduce all of our cooldowns whenever we hit enemies who are afflicted by this curse. This is the cornerstone of what enables the uptime on Bone Storm and Blood Mist. This is what makes the build so damn tanky. We're also going to be taking Amplified Damage, which will give us 12% damage to all enemies that are cursed, and because we're auto-casting Decrepify, everybody's always cursed. We're going to be taking Skeletal Mage Mastery for 60% damage and life on our Skeletal Mages. We're going to be taking Death's Embrace and Death's Reach. So Death's Embrace is going to give you 6% damage against close enemies and 9% damage reduction against close enemies. And Death's Reach is going to give you 12% damage against distant enemies. Now, it's important to know with your minions, each minion does its own check for where it is when determining whether it's close or distant. It's not based on where you are, it's based on where each individual minion is located. So Death's Reach is generally going to buff our mages, Death's Embrace is going to buff our Golem and our Skeletal Warriors. Moving on, we're going to be taking Necrotic Carapace for Fortify. So every time we form a corpse from our skill or a minion, we fortify for 6% of our base life. Now, this is going to be proccing from Reap, from Huge Flesh, and from the Blood Mist, dropping corpses. All of that will proc this, and our Skeletal Warriors with Reap will also proc this with the Reapers. Every time they make a corpse, they proc this. We're also going to be putting 3 points into Reaper's Pursuit. We have loads of darkness skills between our ult and our Reap, and we're going to just get 15% movement speed, which is really nice. And then finally, we're going to be putting 1 point into Corpse Tendrils, and then we're going to get 4 ranks of Corpse Tendrils from our gear to get it up to 5 ranks to optimize its cooldown reduction. Remember, if you go over 5 ranks of Corpse Tendrils, you get diminishing returns on the cooldown reduction. So you just want to get to 5 ranks, so we're always going to get 4 from our boots. And enhanced Corpse Tendrils for the slow, not a big deal, but very importantly, Plate Corpse Tendrils will cause it to apply Vulnerable. And because we're casting Corpse Tendrils, and we're auto-casting Corpse Tendrils with the Heart, we should get about 100% uptime on Vulnerable. Moving on to the ultimate skills. We're going to be taking 3 points into Golem Mastery for 75% damage and life on the Golem. We're going to be taking 3 points of Inspiring Leader for 12% attack speed. This attack speed buff is actually largely for us, for our Reap, but it does add a little bit of damage to our minions, but it's mostly just for our Reap attack speed for proccing Lucky Hit. We're going to be taking 3 points into Bonded in Essence, which is going to heal our minions for 60% of their maximum life every 5 seconds, as long as we have a Skeletal Priest active. This is crazy. This allows our minions to tank so much more than they would normally be able to, especially when paired with Death's Defiance, which makes it so minions can't take more than 30% of their max life from a single instance of damage. So this means that your minions have to be hit at least 4 times in order to die, and our priests are going to constantly be healing our minions. So it becomes very difficult to actually kill the minions. We're also going to be putting 3 points into Hellbent Commander, which is just going to give our minions 30% damage as long as we're close to them. We're also going to be taking Bone Storm, as we talked about before, because Bone Storm is very important to enabling this build in terms of tankiness, damage, and Bone Storm's going to give us all the barrier that we discussed, and 15% damage reduction, and 20% crit. Finally, we're going to be taking Shadow Blight, and Shadow Blight is just going to give us a flat 10% damage multiplier, and it's going to pair very nicely with an aspect that we're going to talk about in a minute to give us a substantial damage boost. So we've talked about the general idea of how the build works, and we've talked about the specific skill tree you're going to want to play. But what about for our gear? What kind of stats are we looking for? What aspects are we looking for? Between our helmet and boots, we're going to want the Blood Gatherers aspect and the Viscous aspect. These are going to increase the number of Skeletal Mages and the number of Skeletal Warriors we can have by 2, and it's going to increase the damage of the ring because we have more dudes out, and they're going to be proccing Lucky Hit more, etc. This is crazy strong. On our chest and legs, we're going to be looking for Aspect of Might for damage reduction after using a basic skill, and Aspect of Shielding Storm, which is what's going to cause the Bone Storm to give us the shield. On our amulet, we're going to be looking for the Aspect of Disobedience. You're going to want this as max rolled as possible. Between our gloves, our rings, our focus, and our wand, all of the remaining aspects can go in any of those slots. So any of those offensive slots are all perfectly acceptable. We're going to want the Osseous Gale aspect, which is going to increase the duration of our Bone Storm by up to 10 seconds when it consumes corpses. We're going to be running the aspect of Reanimation, which is going to give our skeletons 40% increased damage, which is going to increase the ring's damage by 40%. We're going to be looking for the Blighted aspect. This, remember when we were talking about Shadow Blight, the Keystone passive, whenever the Keystone passive procs 10 times, we're going to get a 120% damage multiplier. Remember, Bone Storm is a darkness skill. It's being cast on us and the Golem, plus it applies a dot. So we only have to do damage 10 times to proc it once. So we're going to do damage 100 times in like a couple of seconds, if that. So the uptime on this is going to be almost 100% for just a wild damage multiplier. We're also going to be looking for the aspect of Ultimate Shadow, which is the thing that will actually turn our Bone Storm into a darkness skill. The stats for this build are very important for the build to be played efficiently. We're going to be looking for as much cooldown reduction, lucky hit chance, armor, and damage reduction as we can possibly get. On our helmet, we're going to be looking for lucky hit chance so we have a barrier, cooldown reduction, armor, and finally intelligence. On our chest piece, we're going to just be looking for 3 damage reduction stats. They can be fortified damage reduction from close, etc. as long as it's damage reduction you can afford. And we're going to be looking for total armor. On our gloves, we're going to be looking for crit chance, attack speed, lucky hit chance, and intelligence. For our pants, we're going to be looking for 2 damage reduction stats. Again, same as chest piece, they can be whatever you want. Then we're going to be looking for percent armor. And then finally, we're going to be looking for ranks of Blood Mist to get more uptime on Blood Mist. On our boots, we want ranks of Corpse Tendrils, movement speed after killing an elite, movement speed, and damage reduction while injured. On our wand, we want vulnerable damage, damage to close, critical strike damage, and intelligence. On our necklace, we're going to definitely want lucky hit chance and cooldown reduction. Those are vital, absolutely vital. After that, just look for damage reduction or damage increasing stats, movement speed. You can pretty much fill this in with whatever you want. Hellbent Commander is a fantastic passive to get for your amulet. For our one ring, because remember, one of our rings is the Ring of Mendel, and for the other ring, we're just looking for crit, vulnerable, and then damage to something that we can proc often, whether it's close, crowd controlled, slowed, etc. Our offhand is our next very important piece of gear. We absolutely need lucky hit chance while you have a barrier, and cooldown reduction. The final stat, look for some type of damage reduction. To summarize the items, just find as much lucky hit and cooldown reduction as possible, and then fill in the remaining pieces with damage reduction, critical strike chance, critical strike damage, and vulnerable damage. We've covered so many components of this build, and builds in this game have a lot of depth to them. But there's one final piece of this puzzle that brings this build into the mainstream, into the meta, and that's the Paragon board. There's going to be a link to the full build and to the Paragon board in the description below, but I'm going to tell you the most important parts of the Paragon board. The most important part of the Paragon board that you must do is on the Cult Leader board. You have to run Dead Razor Glyph on this board because it's going to double the effectiveness of the damage reduction nodes here. And the damage reduction here is crazy. From the magic nodes, we're getting 30% with a max level glyph, minus 21. And from the rare node, we're getting an additional 40%. This is a total of 70% damage reduction. This is what's going to keep our minions alive. To keep ourselves alive, we're going to be taking the Gravekeeper glyph in the very first Paragon board. This is going to cause the armor that we gain to be increased by 125%, and so we're going to end up getting a total of 450 armor from this one node. This is very important for our overall survivability. If you guys have any questions about this build, you can leave the question in the comments, or you can check out my Twitch stream where I stream this build every day. Ask any question you want. I'm happy to answer it. I hope you guys liked today's video. I'm so excited that minions are good. Thank God they got buffed, and I'm excited to see you guys in the next video where we start talking about how this build can clear 100s and everything else. This patch is actually really fun. I don't agree with people. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.